Howdy. Hope everybody's doing great today. We are going to switch over from comparing characters to comparing settings, and I'll talk about that more in just a second. But first things first, when I have this video lesson completed, there will be a picture of it right here. You can play it right in the Google slide presentation. Please watch it. And I will be giving you a code word later on in the video lesson that will be worth 20 points today. Okay, so be listening for that. We'll come back to that. Then next, yesterday we talked about aqua, meaning water, Greek root word. Today you're going to talk about bena. Okay, bena is a Greek root word that means good. So your directions, think of 2 or 3 words that use the Greek root word bena. That means good. So in each of these boxes, or at least 2 of these boxes, please find a word that uses the Greek root word bena. Okay? Like we said yesterday, you can use dictionary.com. You can search, words with the Greek root word bena. You can go to the Merriam-Webster online dictionary. You can go to an old-timey book dictionary that maybe you've got at home that you can look up bena, B-E-N-E, and find words that use that Greek root word. So lots of ways that you can come up with at least 2 words that use the Greek root word bena. Okay, so you do need to complete this page. And you need to type in the code word on this page, which I will give you here in a little bit. But today, let's continue comparing these stories. We're comparing different parts of stories. So we have been working on comparing characters, and we've already read 2 versions of the Little Red Riding Hood story. We read the original version, where the protagonist was Little Red Riding Hood, the antagonist was the wolf, and the setting was the woods. We'll talk about that more. The problem was the wolf wanted to eat her. Solution, Little Red's father saved her. Then we read Petite Rouge Riding Hood. The protagonist was Petite Rouge. Antagonist is the gator. Setting was in the swamp of Louisiana. Problem, the gator wanted her food. What was the solution to that problem? So, you've got problems, also called conflict, and solution, also called resolution. So you got, just like in math, you got a problem, 2 plus 2, and the solution equals 4. Of course, the solution has to match the problem. It has to solve that problem, just like 4 is the solution to 2 plus 2. They match, okay? It makes sense. So the problem in Petite Rouge was the gator wanted to eat her food. The solution was Petite Rouge, her cat and grandmare, poured hot sauce in his mouth, and he jumped into the water and swam away, okay? I am planning for us to read 2 more Little Red stories this week, so that's why these 2 titles are here. And it says Mrs. Hancock will complete this page. So you do not need to complete this page, okay? I put this here just so we can keep track of what we read. But today we're specifically going to talk about setting. So in the original Little Red story, the setting was in the woods. And Little Red Riding Hood describes, or the story, the narrator really describes those woods in a certain way, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then in Petite Rouge, the narrator described the swamp in a certain way. So what I have done is I have put these passages from both stories on the very next slide. Now I want to take a moment to help you understand the word setting. Where characters act in the story, a setting is where, and sometimes even when, the story takes place. So lots of times, where and when a story takes place could change the story. For instance, in this case, the original story had a wolf as the antagonist, and Petite Rouge had a gator as the antagonist. Well, the setting affected that because in Little Red Riding Hood, it makes sense that there's a wolf in the woods. Well, in the swamps of Louisiana, you have a lot of alligators. So it makes sense that the antagonist in the story Petite Rouge Riding Hood is a gator. But that's one example of how the setting, where and maybe when a story takes place, changes how the story is told. So that's the biggest thing I need you to understand today. The reason why settings are important is because they change how the story is told. So you've really got to pay attention to that. In fact, in the other two stories that we're going to read about, Little Red Riding Hood, uh, Little Red Cowboy Hat is the Western version. And so it's going to be set out in the West. And you'll see how the fact that it's set out in the West, how it changes the Little Red Riding Hood story. And then the last one we're going to read is Lon Popo, a Red Riding Hood story from China. And so you're going to see the fact that it's set in China, how that changes the Little Red story. So settings can change how a story is told, and that's why we need to pay attention to them. So moving on to what the little passages that I've put here from either story that we have read. I'm going to read both of them, and I want you to think while I'm reading how they describe the setting. Okay, first one, Little Red Riding Hood. All around her grew pretty wild flowers, which she loved so well, and she stopped to pick a bunch for her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood wandered from her path and was stooping to pick a flower when from behind her a gruff voice said, "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood." So here I see where it says, it talks about pretty wildflowers. It talked about her picking a bunch of wildflowers. It talked about her wandering on a path. So I'm thinking in my mind, and actually I've got posters in the front of my room, and the first strategy is visualizing. And visualizing is being able to see it in your mind. So by the fact that she describes it as pretty wildflowers and having a path, I'm like thinking about this really pretty lush forest that has all of these green trees and really soft grass with a pretty little path that kind of winds around in the middle of it. So that's what I'm visualizing as the setting of this story. So that would be a great strategy as you read descriptions of the setting of a story, to visualize it in your mind. Okay? So there was Little Red. Now let's talk about Petite Rouge Riding Hood. It starts out by saying, "Back in the swamp where that Spanish moss grow, I heard me a story happened long time ago. In a little old house that been built out of wood live a girl people call Petite Rouge Riding Hood." All right, so it talks about, in this story, a swamp. And it talks about Spanish moss. And I'm not sure that you've ever seen Spanish moss, but it's really pretty. It grows a lot in our southern states, like around Florida and Georgia and Alabama, I'm probably thinking as well. But on these huge trees, there's like this moss that's just kind of dripping down from them. And it makes it could be either kind of creepy or pretty, depending on how you feel about it. But using our visualizing strategy of seeing a picture of this in my mind, I'm thinking of a swamp, where there's lots of water and there's trees growing out of the water. And I'm thinking about maybe logs floating around, and I'm thinking about these moss dripping off the trees. And then maybe gators kind of hiding in different places. So it kind of gives me a mental picture of where these characters were, which really helps you understand the story if you understand where the characters are. So to help you with that, this is what we're going to do today. But before I do that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell you that today's code word for this video, and if you can type it in this box where the video will be, then you'll get 20 points. And if you don't, then you won't get 20 points. So make sure you're watching the videos. Anyway, code word for today is pumpkin. Code word for today is pumpkin. So you need to have pumpkin typed in this box to get that 20 points to prove that you made a good faith effort to watch this video. So today's code word is pumpkin. All right, back to the lesson. We had just read 2 passages that described the setting in these 2 stories, and this is what we're going to do. This is our short answer for this week, the only one we'll do this week, okay? It says, please answer this short answer question in writing. You will be graded using the checklist to the right. So remember race? I told you about race in a previous video. R, restate the question. A, answer the question completely. C, cite evidence from the text, starting your sentence with a phrase like, I know because the text says. And E, especially use quotation marks around the evidence you copied from the text. So you're going to want to use this to write your answer. Here's the question. Our video lesson today talked about what a story setting is and the settings of these 2 stories. How are the settings in both of these stories different? Quote sentences from the 2 stories. See the slide before this one. So basically, I want you to take your text evidence from this slide right here. Okay, text evidence from right here to prove your answer. So you're going to start out your answers by restating the question. The question is, how were the settings in both of these stories different? So you could start out by saying something like, these 2 settings were different because, and then say where one was and then where the other one was, period. And then you could start out your second sentence with, I know because the text says in the Little Red story, and you could quote your text, and then in that sentence, and start the third sentence by saying, I also know because the text in Petite Rouge says, and then give your text evidence there. But you're really going to need 2 pieces of text evidence. You're going to need a piece of text evidence from Little Red Riding Hood, this box right here, and Petite Rouge, this right here. And of course, when you quote text, you're copying word for word. So you do need to do this. You do need to do this slide. So you're typing on 3 slides. You're typing the code word while you're watching this video. You're typing at least 2 words on this slide that have the Greek root word bena in it. And you're typing your answer to your short answer question here using this checklist. As always, when you are done with your work, after you're done with your work, you can click Turn In. And if you have any questions in the meantime, just let me know. Private comment, Google Meet, remind, text, email, however you'd like to contact me. And I hope you have a great afternoon. We'll see you later.